Hi and welcome. I'm excited to be here with you today to talk about practical ways to cope with uncertainty. So I'm going to shout out and say hi to everyone who's here with me live, and please let me know you're here and where you're from in the thread. And if you're watching this pre-recorded and encore, do the same because I will check in on the days that I post this as an encore. And so I am thrilled to share this kind of last minute program that I wanted to give to the LinkedIn community because I'm seeing that there's so much uncertainty, and especially with the advance of AI, there's a lot of fear out there. We've been through the pandemic, and now it's AI, and it's just never ending. So I'm just going to jump right in and say that the brain craves certainty, just like it craves food, water, sleep. And in today's time, that craving for certainty has never been better, has never been greater. But there's good news. And the good news is that certainty is an emotional state, not an intellectual state. So in today's cram packed program, I've got 10 tips. We're going to look at practical ways to cope with uncertainty and how to create what I'm calling more internal peace. If you know my book, From Conflict to Courage, you know that I talk a lot about the inner game and resolving the inner conflict first. There's never been a better time to work on that inner game. I read an interesting article from a guy named Dr. Stephen Stonesy, and it was in Psychology Today. And he said that he's the one that said that certainty is the emotional state, not an intellectual state. So I found that pretty profound. And what that means to me is that if we as leaders can self regulate, then we can help our team members, our colleagues, and our clients when they exhibit the craving for certainty. So, I'm going to talk about first how to identify the unhealthy ways that people cope with certainty. And so, um, I've got a list, and let's see if I can. There we go. I've got a little slide for it because I think that makes it easier. Um, Here's some unhealthy ways that people cope with uncertainty. And this is a good way to reinterpret bad behavior or unproductive behavior. Blaming, outbursts of anger, gossiping, confirmation bias, catastrophizing, hoarding. I just read an article. I do a lot of research in my topics of interest, and hoarding can be a signal that someone is dealing with the lack of certainty. They want certainty. They're craving certainty, and hoarding makes them feel safer, even though it's destructive. So do some research on that. It's pretty interesting. I find myself hoarding clothes sometimes. I don't know about you. I think we all hoard in certain ways. And my new interpretation of that is that if you think that the past is better than the future, you want to hang on. But if you think your future is going to be better and bigger than your past, it's easier to let go and let in the new. So any kind of destructive behavior that you see might be an indication that someone's struggling with their fear of the lack of certainty. And so I wanted to give you some research that I did, and I've talked about this on a previous live, but I think it bears repeating. Uncertainty, the feeling that we don't have any certainty, it creates anxiety, and it is the leading cause of disability worldwide, according to the World Economic Forum. So the anxiety is the leading cause, the leading disability worldwide. And I saw another quote. It said by 2030, the cost to the global economy of all mental health problems could amount to 16 trillion. And that was from the World Economic Forum. And you know what? That's just a few years away. Then, according to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, anxiety disorders in the United States affect over 40 million adults every year. So the tips I'm going to share today are really answering the question, what can we do as individuals? So if you're not a leader, what can you do? And if you're a leader, what can you do? So as individuals, we can model stability in our behavior and language so that we become a trusted resource. Because if we're honest about it, with a few things that we don't want to happen, any of us can have a mental health issue with the fear of uncertainty. So it could happen to anybody. So we're all on a journey. And then as leaders, we can notice when someone's demeanor changes. Behavioral change might mean that there's a mental health challenge, that the person is craving certainty and they're using coping mechanisms to deal with their emotional state. So I'm going to check in real fast. I see a couple of friends. Hard to be here during this time of year, isn't it? Hi, Alicia. So good to see you. And Gerald, an old friend of mine, so glad you're here. I'm seeing some others starting to come on. Feel free to just put your name and where you're from. And if you've got a question or a comment, I'll look at that later. So I have 10 tips today, and so I'm going to divide this into two parts. So let me show you the slide for part one. This is it. This is the first, these are the first five tips. We're going to learn how to distinguish between clarity and certainty, manage your narrative, stop ruminating, promote personal responsibility, and build strong relationships. So, what I plan to do is to go through those five, give you some solid tips. I'll check in once again to see who's here, if there's any questions. Then I'll share the last five, and you can definitely go watch this later if you can't stay for the whole thing. So, number one is to make a distinction between certainty and clarity. The fact is, we will never have complete certainty. That is just a myth, but we can create clarity. And I believe making this distinction gives you a sort of inner peace. As an individual, here's what you can be clear about. You can be clear about your values, you can be clear about your mission, your vision. Clarity about your personal values is your North Star for every decision, and even for how you show up on social media. For example, if your top value is kindness, then you cannot show up on social media spewing out hateful language. Now, as a leader, here's what you can do. You can be clear about next steps. Maybe you can't be attached to the outcome, even though a plan gives you that outcome, but you can be clear about next steps and give that security. And you can consciously convey clarity instead of certainty. And what this means is that we're committed to the process and the outcome, but we're flexible when we need to make shifts. And it's really important to convey that instead of like, I know this is going to work. I know this is going to be the outcome. You can't know that. Things happen, but you can plan for it. And so I find it's best to what I call shorten the gap and create goals with small wins to celebrate versus always moving the carrot and never feeling a sense of accomplishment. Hi there, I'm seeing some more people here. Gregory, some of them says LinkedIn user, so I'm glad you're here, but maybe we're not connected. So if you want to, you can connect with me after today. So we've just talked about the first one, which is make distinction between certainty and clarity. The second tip is to learn how to manage your narrative. I talk about this over and over and over, and I talk about it a lot in my book, and it's something I've worked on this year. And this is about noticing the little voice inside your head. A great deal of anxiety is due to unmanaged thinking. And here's a saying that I love: your story is the source of your suffering. We human beings are meaning making machines. So, here are some tips of what you can do as an individual. Number one is you can notice your focus. What you focus on expands, and where you focus is where you put your attention. So, just notice that. I was on a call with some really successful business people the other day, and I heard someone say, it's great to review my past year and to know that I'm not the loser I thought I was. And I thought, wow, how familiar is that? How we all judge ourselves. We compare ourselves to other people and we don't know the whole story. And then we start to believe those things that we think. So just start to notice that kind of thinking about beating yourself up. And then step two is ask yourself if you can control the situation. If yes, what is your next step? And if no, then just shift your thinking. Have a different perspective. Say that's one of many stories. There could be another truth. There may be things I don't know. Or I used to do this when I was starting my career and I had such low self confidence. When I had those doubts, or when someone even tried to spur those doubts, I would just say, thank you for sharing. Or, well, that is a thought. So you don't have to believe everything you think. And just because you think it does not mean that it's true. We cannot buy in to thinking that's unmanaged. And so, as a leader, here's what you can do: you can become a radical listener. What I mean is that you want to listen for emotional cues that the person is struggling with uncertainty. If you'll hear a negative vibe and you're likely to hear anger, resentment, strong need to be right, then you can acknowledge their emotional energy and then shift the direction of the conversation. You can practice things, saying things like this: well, it sounds like you're upset, or it sounds like you're really concerned, or I'm hearing anger, walk me through. You're not saying that's exactly how they feel, but you're giving them a chance to explain it. And what I have found in the years and years of coaching and consulting is that so often we're trying to fix someone, we're trying to elevate their mood. That's not our job. Sometimes people just want to be heard and acknowledged so they can process it. There's nothing worse than being in a low vibe and having someone say, cheer up, it's not that bad. Consider all that's going on in the world. Everyone's personal problems are their own. So we have to acknowledge people where they are and not feel this urge to fix it or to make people wrong. I'm going to check in again and real quick before the next one. Yeah, Gerald, that's right. Leaders must have good emotional IQ as well as coping with these. And you like this one, Kim, where you focus, your energy flows. Absolutely. And hi there from the UK and a LinkedIn user from California. Okay, so we've talked about managing your narrative, and now this one is very related, number three, which is to stop ruminating. And so, rumination is defined as engaging in a repetitive negative thought loop that is continually in the mind without completion. And this habit, we all do it when we're worried about something, but it creates new neural connections for the purpose of repetitive thinking. So, if you can notice the repetition, and if you can't, you might need to ask someone, like, am I repeating myself? But as an individual, here's some steps you can take. Number one is become aware of the thought loop. What is it that you just keep thinking? I know that I've had times in my life where I kept thinking, this isn't going to work out, or what if this fails? And it's just repetitive, there's no resolution. You might, step two is what I said before, ask a friend if they notice a theme in your language. If there's someone that you trust, just say, are you noticing a theme? Am I repeating the story of my divorce or the story of my being laid off? Am I continuing to talk about it 3 years later, even though I've moved on? Because if you're talking about it, it means you haven't moved on. And then you want to learn how to replace the thought with something more soothing. And it's sort of like the last tip. It's sort of like just saying, thank you for sharing. I know, brain, that you're just interested in helping me, but I don't need to be thinking about that anymore. Or you could even journal for a while and just get it out of your system and say, I've got 10 minutes to think about it, but then I'm going to be done. So there's lots of tips. And so I encourage you to try whatever is resonating with you. Let me know how that's going. I believe the more we can help each other and admit that we've had some of these issues, the easier it'll be to support each other when we are going through sort of a down cycle. And especially as a leader, here's some steps you can take. Ask yourself, if you're ruminating, if you need to have a difficult conversation. Because in most cases with leadership, there's an elephant in the room. And that's why I wrote From Conflict to Courage. We just push that stuff down and we don't even get curious about it. So, setting a time for a conversation will help to stop some of the rumination, because then you're going to plan for that conversation. And if you have my book, or if you don't, you can get it, because in chapter 7 in From Conflict to Courage, there is a framework that so many people have found helpful. Yes, it's more helpful to get coaching, but I've had people use this without coaching and they started a conversation and they stayed on track. So if you notice others ruminating, you can bring that elephant right into the room, and you don't have to be confrontational. You can say something like, Kim, I've noticed that the last 3 times we've talked, you've been concerned about X. Have you come to any resolution yet? Walk me through what's going on for you. Then you pause, and then you can ask if they want coaching. They may not. They may not want feedback, but you've brought the issue into the room, into their attention. And I'll tell you what, often they deny what you've noticed, but it does bring about awareness. So that is tip number 3, is stop ruminating. I'll go over these 5 to give you the snapshot if you're just now joining, but I'm going to move on to number 4, which is promote personal responsibility. As an individual, you can practice responsible language and responsible behavior. And it sounds easy in theory, but it's amazing how our language betrays us, that we're blaming someone else or that we're not really owning the part we played in something. So, here are some steps as an individual that you can take to become a more responsible and aware person. Number one is just learn how to separate facts of what happened to what you feel. There's the facts, and those facts can be proven. It's 18 inches, or it's just too small, too big, all that's just judgment. It's just a feeling. It wasn't right. But if you measure something, if there's a number to it or an amount, then it's a fact. If something happened on a particular date, it's a fact. Now, how you interpret it is how you feel. And number two is, when you feel stuck, ask yourself this: what are my choices now? Not what you could have done then, because those choices are over. So, what are my choices at this point to move forward? And if you feel resentment, I can tell you that resentment is a signal that you need to have a conversation. It means you're probably avoiding something that needs to be addressed. As a leader, you have to be the model for taking personal responsibility and decide that no matter what happens, your interpretations and behavior absolutely belong to you. So be very careful about buying into a victim story, taking sides, or rescuing. And there's something I talk about a lot, and it's do not allow power of attorney. And what that means is if someone comes to you saying, well, Chris said X, Y, and Z, and you ought to hear what Mary is saying about your leadership, like don't let people represent other people. Make people represent themselves. Don't speak for other people. Everybody thinks this about this decision. No, here's what I think about the decision. I can't represent everyone else. You'll stay out of so much trouble if you don't allow power of attorney and if you don't play power of attorney. And you want to ask your colleagues and your employees when there's drama, when there's conflict, when you're trying to guide someone. The question is, well, you can ask, "What do you want?" And that's a whole other coaching method. But you can say, "What are your choices now?" Try to bring people into their power. Try to bring people into their choices because when you find your choice, you find your power. That's one of my theories. I'm going to check in real quick and I'm going to give a quick overview of what we've just covered for people that are just now showing up. And again, this will be recorded. And yeah, a habit, me too. And I've worked on that one. I've worked on that quite a bit over the last few years. Hi from Brazil. So glad you're here. So let me get to this next slide. Let's see. This one, this will show you where we've been. So this is where we've been if you're just getting here. And if you want to see any of these, you can, it will be saved. I also put these on my YouTube channel. So it's YouTube.com/Marlene Chisholm, and I save them there. And we're going to do something new next year where you can have access to all of these in one place. So stay tuned for that. But we've talked about distinguishing between clarity and certainty, managing your narrative, stop ruminating, promote personal responsibility, and build strong relationships. Here are the next five that we're going to talk about. Stop self-obsessing, leverage your life, seek resolution. Oh, I should. That's a mistake there. Seek regulation before resolution is what it should say. Seek regulation. So resolve inside before you try to resolve on the outside. Build deep trust within and create what I call a strategy Sunday. So that's where we're going now. And so we'll start with we'll go with number 5 and then we'll go on. So number 5 is to rejuvenate your relationships. I've done a lot of study on this and it's so simple, it's so 101, but relationships are either a source of suffering or source of renewal. And many of us have lost touch over the last 3 or 4 years due to life changes, illnesses, or the effects of COVID. So, as an individual, start making a list of people you want to reconnect with and then put together a plan. I can tell you it's not going to happen without a plan because you won't have any accountability at all. So, what you want to do is set some goals. For example, one phone call a week, one coffee, one lunch, or something once a month. It's really important that it's intentional. And so, as a leader, what can you do? Well, you want to strengthen trust. Is what you want to do as a leader because you're not going to be best friends with your coworkers or your colleagues or your team. So maybe it's just a short one-on-one with immediate team to learn about them or to ask for an idea. And is there some way that you could start recognizing their efforts rather than just taking them for granted? The point here is that this needs to be intentional and not left to chance. And both your personal and professional life, if you have broken trust or there's some unresolved conflict, make the effort to do a reset and it's going to give you renewed energy. So I've started having at least one new Zoom call per week. And before that, just felt like I didn't have time. But I'm talking to people that you might even consider would be people that are doing the same thing I do. But I always think there's room for all. And I want to learn about what they're up to, how I can support them. And I'm not worried about really getting business right now. I'm just researching and building relationships. And I'm finding it to be very enjoyable. Even in 30 minutes, you can really make a lot happen. So we're going to go into the second half of this now. And number 6 is to stop obsessing, stop self obsessing. Self obsession actually leads to depression and anxiety. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had a friend that became so self obsessed that they hijacked conversations, or it's always about them? They hog the air. It's like they talk, talk, talk about themselves through good times, through bad times, it's blah, 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 but enough about me. What do you think about me? Now, if most of us would admit it, if we are stressed, we become way too self obsessed and we want to vent and vent and vent, and we grow new neural connections for the purpose of venting. So, that is self obsession. If you're feeling the least bit depressed, which it's common this time of year, start reaching out to others, start thinking about others, stop worrying about your position, your elevation. Start thinking about how you could just reach out and be interested in others. So just shift your focus and notice, just notice how much airspace you're taking. How often are you the one talking? So my golden rule here is just to listen first. And when you show concern for others, it magically reduces your own stress as a rule, and you feel connected to something outside of yourself. I'm going to say that this takes so much discipline, especially if you're a fast processor. And I am that. I'm a fast talker, a fast processor. And sometimes I don't realize I'm taking up too much air. And so letting the other person speak, putting your tongue on the top of your mouth and letting someone finish their sentence. And if they're going on and on, to be able to break through and say, I hate to interrupt, but I'm on a time limit. There's something I want to say. Are you at a good place for that? Like being so intentional about allowing others to be heard. And as a leader, you just pay attention to those who aren't engaging and those that are talking too much and try to facilitate that in the meetings in the moment. Maybe you'll have to have a conversation with someone if they're not hearing you, and just to say, I want to try to engage Philip a little bit more. So I'm going to ask you to help me. I love that you have so many ideas, but I need support in getting some others to talk. And so you just have to do that as a leader because sometimes people are just not very aware. So here's where we are. We are on we finished number 6. So I'm going to go into number 7. Hopefully, we can get this done in just about 30 minutes. The next one is I'm calling it leverage your life. We're all drowning in a sea of choice, and there's so much noise. There's too many distractions, and we're all so busy. If you're burning the candle at both ends, sometimes you have to, that's for sure. But if you're doing it all the time, ask yourself why. As an individual, maybe it's really time to leverage yourself by hiring someone to do things that create stress for you. I know there's people that make a ton of money and they won't even consider getting someone to clean their house once a week. So if you're caring for young children or an elderly parent, or you could have someone do your grocery shopping or your house cleaning. That can be the difference in chronic stress and well-being. And I know it feels like I wouldn't know what to do with my free time, but what I've learned as a solopreneur, entrepreneur, that when I have free time is when I get great ideas about partnering, about creating new value offerings. So it will help you as a leader or as an individual to stop being so busy all the time. And I would encourage you to stop thinking in terms of money in your life overall and start to think in terms of value. The value is in improving your health and well being so that you can relax and be present to what really matters. As a leader, you want to check in to make sure you aren't suffering from hero syndrome or micromanaging too much. Make sure you're building in a succession plan by training others to do some of your higher level tasks. And this is more than just delegating. This is about training and relying on others so you can share the spotlight and up level their learning. So we've got 2 more to go. I'm going to check in and see if there's any questions, anything different. I'm not seeing it, so maybe it's just all of us, and maybe some others will be watching it later. I'm going to go on to number 8, which is to seek regulation before resolution. You know, I had a typo on the slide, but seek regulation before resolution. Unresolved conflict is a leading contributor to elevated stress and can contribute to the feelings of uncertainty and instability. So, if you're in conflict with someone, it's really easy, especially if it's been going on for a while, it's really easy to lose control and have regrets later. This leads you to feel uncertain about your leadership abilities. And that's because when you're overstimulated, your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, actually shuts down and your primal brain takes over. And the primal brain only cares about self protection and doesn't consider the consequences of overreacting. So, what can you do as an individual and a leader? As an individual, you can create more stability in your life by not giving into a rush of emotions. Self regulation is the ability to regulate emotions instead of being governed by them. Because I can tell you that when you're really angry, you feel like lashing out and putting that email out there. And I've still made mistakes like that even 5 or 6 years ago. And I knew better, but it just felt right. And then once you calm down, it just isn't a good thing. So you want to always regulate first before you address a conflict, either by email or by phone or by Zoom. You want to be able to self regulate. And as a leader, you have to calm yourself down before having a difficult conversation. Learn the skills to have productive conversations. Again, check out chapter 7 in my book, From Conflict to Courage, and it is a framework, a blueprint. So if you're struggling with that, it tells you where to start, what kind of distractions are going to happen, and how to create accountability. That is a skill that you need to learn along with self regulation. Okay, we're going to go to number 9. Number 9 is build deep trust within. I hear a lot of anxiety based on what seems to be a lack of trust. Employees don't trust their managers, colleagues don't trust each other, managers don't trust their executives, and around we go. There's nothing to bring forth the fear of uncertainty like feeling like you cannot trust others around you. So, what can you do? If you're an individual, you can work on building deep trust within yourself. Know yourself. Do what you say you're going to do. Let your word be golden. Don't say, let's do lunch or I'll get back to you. Instead, get it on a calendar. Don't default to your feelings. Just because you don't feel like doing something doesn't mean anything. Professionals do what they promise to do. Build the skills and know that you can get a job anywhere because you trust yourself. I'll never forget when I met someone on a plane and the airline attendant came by and said to my friend who was sitting by the window, said, "Would you trust? Will you push out the side and let people out and help them? You know, if we get into trouble?" And she said, "Yes." And then my friend paused and said to the other person sitting on the aisle, she said, "Do you trust me with your life?" And I laughed, and the other woman said, "No, but I trust me." And I thought, wow, I want to be like that. I trust me. I'm going to do what I have to do. So once you build that solid trust within, you're less worried about whether you can trust someone else or not because you have good judgment and you're so self aware that you can kind of sniff out any danger by the way people talk. So, really, just work on building self trust. And as a leader, the same rules apply even more. Don't be so casual with promises. If you're an appeaser, you have to stop telling people what they want to hear and tell them what they need to hear. You can do this in a very calm and respectful manner for the purpose of their growth. But what I know is that self trust creates rock solid confidence. So practice the mantra, I trust me. Now I'm going to go into number 10. I'm going to give you that tip and then I will share a couple of slides with you so you can maybe grab a snapshot if you want to. And also at the end, there's an assessment I'd love for you to take if you're a senior leader. So number 10 is to set aside what I call strategy Sunday. It may be any day of the week that works for you, but it's a time to plan. And I want to say that a plan is a guide, not a god. A good plan for your week can really calm you down and make you feel like you're in charge. Even if the plan doesn't work, it guides you and gives you choices. So, for individuals, I would say create a 2 to 3 hour block on Sunday, Monday, Friday to plan your week, whatever day works for you. But you have to be kind of fresh to do this because this is strategy work. And it's sort of like slow down to speed up. So, whether it's meal prep, kid activities, all your commitments, look at the week from a bird's eye point of view so that you know what support you need and what you need to cancel, what you need to stop booking. It's going to teach you discipline to actually have that strategy Sunday. You want to build in buffer time to prep for calls and to get to and from appointments. And you're going to feel so much more in control when you show up on Monday and you're not behind the 8 ball. And this is true whether you work virtually or you work inside of a building. And I know a lot of people don't work on site anymore, but it still applies to virtual work. So for leaders, it's about planning your meetings, planning your difficult conversations, your coaching conversations, putting a plan to these. When are you going to have them? What are you going to say? What do you expect the outcome to be? What's the follow up? What's the decision? And keep track of your out of office time. Keep notes in your computer to keep you on track. So that is all 10. And I'm going to show you a um, I'm going to show you a slide of all those so that you can see them, and here they are. And I got it right on here. Seek resol. Nope, it's seek regulation before resolution. So make that note in your head on number 8. But this is all of the tips of ways to cope with uncertainty. And so you can see those here. And if you got value from today's program, I'm just going to ask that you share this on your thread. And if you want the learning guide to this one, the tip sheet, if you're already on the mailing list, you'll get it when I get it. I didn't have time to put it together this time. This was a last minute deal. But if you want to email me, I'll get it to you after the first of the year. And that's Marlene at marlenechisholm.com. I always encourage people to replay these, use the sheets, and have a lunch and learn, kind of a free way to train your other leaders. If you haven't yet, get my book, From Conflict to Courage. And if you are a senior leader, I'm just going to say, hey, go take this assessment. It's um, my culture of avoidance assessment. I just put that together, and I'm always willing. If you're at the top of the organization or you have influence to the top, I'm willing to have a call to discuss how I might be able to help you. So I'm very thankful that you showed up today, and 7 and 9 resonate. But yes, thank you so much for sharing that feedback. Again, please share this on your own thread if you got value, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're not connected with me, do so. I can invite you to this if we're connected. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next year.